Okay, hello. Welcome to the Scrappy podcast, where we share stories of founders and tech professionals in various sectors of emerging tech, especially AI and blockchain. At TSP, we are a community of learners who believe in democratizing access to quality tech education. We are hosts Ronak and Shweta, and today we are joined by Aakash Guglani, and we are here to learn about Akash's journey as a technology policy strategist and manager at the Digital India Foundation. So, Akash has been doing work which specializes in AI ethics, data governance, and research driven policy making for India's digital economy. He also happens to be a Young India fellow like both Shweta and I. He's a classmate and a very, very close friend. So thank you so much for joining us today, Akash.
Always a pleasure and always fun to chat back with you guys. So it's always great fun.
Thank you, Akash. Let's dive right in. We would love to hear about your journey so far. Take us through the key moments, the challenges, and the milestones that shaped your path, and help us relive your story with you.
So interestingly, first of all, I'm thank you for calling me. And so it starts with, let's say I'm a finance professional. I did my
Mhm.
undergraduation in management studies. I used to head a student investment fund, so I was always a
Mhm.
numbers person. Then things changed. I remember I was in one of the conferences by Harvard in Mumbai, and Shaheen Mistry, the co-founder of, I think, founder of Teach for India, came up and gave a very beautiful, insightful talk about how we can help, how our small efforts can help, children, social impact sectors, health, education, and that really moved me. So I went for a Teach for India kind of interview for 2 years of teaching. Obviously, terribly failed. I was teaching more like a professional, but there was no empathy. So remember, I was moved by a speech, but my incentives were not aligned. And you remember the person who took my exit interview. I didn't know there was a thing called exit interview that happened, and that guy told me, you know, you should go for a policy career. So first time I heard of public
Mhm.
policy or anything like policy was an exit interview of Teach for India, where they were telling me that you're not suitable for to be a teacher. Why don't you go and use your skills as a policy professional? Things turned. I went for UPSC, could not clear the mains, and was first time lost something in my life. Always a good scorer, used to head top classes. At that time, felt what should I do? And I think there our journey converges. Uh, there was this program by Ashoka University Young India Fellowship, where I met you guys. It was a really good kind of very good, I would say, public policy kind of ecosystem. You are learning about, let's say, physics, mathematics, at the same time about history, sociology. So it's a good mix for any policy professional to go through. It's a kind of interdisciplinary study. There I really liked, intellectual conversations with you guys, with other people, specifically on cognitive science. I remember one of the courses, which was so much what I do right now of AI, and I really like the philosophy part of it. So I pursued second year as mostly a major philosophy. At that time, during that year in 2019 20,
19.
I
Mm-hmm.
s- 19, I started studying more about the consciousness, the idea of self, and at that time the conversation around AI comes about. When you had this Turing test, what is it like like to be a human? How do you have the language conversation? Whatever we are reading right now, I remember we used to have those conversations in Cog Science and in my masters. And I did my thesis in quantum mechanics and let's say Buddhist philosophy. So all these questions were really, interesting me. That how do you think mind exists? Is there anything called causation? I was grappling with the reductionist theory, whether in physics there is fundamental foundational laws. Do you really think mind exists? And these were the questions AI researchers are also tackling. That if you have this let's say entity called AI, what is it? Is it like mechanical laws of physics which are really grappling that kind of entity, or do you think carbon-based lives like us have some other kind of laws? So those questions really, pushed me towards AI research. but I was doing it from a philosophical lens, more foundational, principle based. I was not into technical research. That's why AI ethics comes to me so much. That if you have these systems, how do you tackle and have their conversations? What is it to be like a human in this kind of totally automated world? And that thesis got published in Indian Council of Philosophical Research, Mental Causation. That moved me towards, I was working and started teaching. I really wanted to go for PhD, intellectual
Hmm.
history, really wanted to understand these ideas much more deeply. What is the idea of self? How do you have these political processes, statecraft, whatever we are reading in, this geopolitics of technology. And I was working with Dr. Pratap Bhanu Mehta for 1 year, teaching Western political thought on Aristotle, on let's say Wollstonecraft, all these concerns, and I was teaching these issues of what is it, what is it to be like a state, policymaker in a state. How does Plato thinks about the constitution of mind, of body, and how it links with statecraft. So that moved me towards obviously Pratap was he had to leave Ashoka, and and that also made sure I wanted to leave academia. I didn't want to go because if that kind of person is not suitable. And it was also COVID. I wanted to stay near my house, and
Hmm.
this opportunity came up with Dr. Arvind Gupta. He had come to Ashoka, remember, in our YF classes as a guest lecturer. He talked about this digital public infrastructure, what India is doing on Aadhaar, and I used to ask him questions that why can't we let's say why can't we spread it to the world? I think I remember that was my question. And why, if it's such a great system, why can't we spread it? And he offered me, why don't you work for me? And I felt this guy is just giving me oral offer. There's nothing into it, and somehow things turned in. I started working with him. I think the opportunity came up, and from that onwards, my work is totally into. Let's say my journey started. I think first day of my job was to design a payment architecture of, let's say, government of Jordan under a World Bank project. So I had to
Wow.
read payment architecture because Arvind thought that I was more interested in foundational principles. So my first policy note, let's say to a minister of entrepreneurship in IT, was how do you price APIs? And guys, I didn't know what APIs meant.
Right.
So I
Right.
took so because see point of for me, I'm more interested in foundational questions. So for me, it was like how do you price an item? Did you price it on bundles? Do you price it on, let's say, access requests? So I'm very open with those econ kind of questions because that's more philosophy. That if these kind of requests are coming, how, should you price it? And larger, what's the larger purpose? Do you want to price a system? Do you want to price a transaction? These questions are really interested. I like that part. And at the same time, Arvind was part of the advisory committee of ONDC, which is like
Right.
this network for digital commerce. And he told me, why don't you read about it? Learn about open systems, platform economics, and how can we reshape our this e-commerce system. And I started working on this kind of At that time, I started learning about digital public infrastructure. What's a public infrastructure strategy? What's let's say a private infrastructure strategy? You remember one of the courses we used to study in YF, the economics of policy making, which Shiv Kumar of
Right.
this.
Right. The public policy one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So those principles started, working out. Oh, maybe that's the incentive structure. If you have, let's say, customer acquisition cost is so much for a private platform, they will try to recover it by commissions. You started learning about
Hmm.
those things, and then policy making became very easier for me because this is more about understanding the incentive structure of different stakeholders. A company is operating in certain systems. They have econ systems. They are also, let's say, policymakers are also working in a legal system. They have to have
Right.
a political constituency. They have to. So public policy is more about you understand the business interests, you understand political interest, but you still have to go through it as democratic system, which political theory gives me that you have to run a state. So how do you do
Right.
that to balance both these? That's my journey. Like last 2 3 years, let's say every week, I'm looking at my deeper interest is how do you balance this interest in innovation and competition and private, let's say, larger public. So that's my kind of journey as of now, and obviously we can dig deeper.
That's one hell of a journey, man. Going from, thinking about what is mind, what is thinking, what is thought to then, pricing APIs It's quite a journey. Let's take a step back though. You just told me that your thesis was on Buddhism and quantum mechanics. I don't think I've ever heard those two words in the same sentence. So why don't you tell us, what the thesis was about, what the title was? I'm very interested in the title, and if I can read it maybe on archival.
Yeah, obviously you can search it. Yeah, mental causation, uh, uh, Buddhist response to it. I think something like that. And it's peer reviewed and well published all across the. It's a question like, do you consider the independence of mind when we say causation? As you are both science people and engineering students, might that in science there's a hard rule of causation. A has to be dependent on B. But in mine, when we say, let's say, my thesis starts with this. When we say, I'm thirsty and I want to have water, did my mind cause that action for me to get up and get the glass of water? It on an observational lens, it's very easy. Yeah, there is something like entity called Akash, which has this mind, which thought that I am thirsty and wants to get. But if you interrogate it and you start investigating it, if entity called mind exists, what are its laws? Are they independent? The classic reductionist theory is that it has to be reducible to some foundational reality where whenever I have thirst, you should also do the same action. But most people don't do that. Let's say if you're a thirsty person in a Rajasthan village, your response might be totally different to let's say a thirsty person in Mumbai, or let's say in Iceland. And so Buddhist response is like on questioning this self, this identity. So Buddhist will not accept that there is a continuous identity called Akash which is making this action. They will just totally problematize this idea. They will say we only exist in particular realities. Because they started talking about particular realities, then we started talking about quantum mechanics. That in the quantum mechanics there's this probabilistic systems. You ask questions to the nature and you can predict a certain response because there are limited kind of responses. If you keep on asking similar questions again and again and again, by the very act of asking certain questions again and again, you can preempt a certain response. It's never a full totality, but that's the kind of traditional quantum mechanics, that if there are certain probability systems, I know by observation, I can, if I keep on asking that, uh, let's say nature of the as an observer, I might get certain answer. And that observational, and and it's controversial. Still, many people accept it as a, let's say, good science. Some people still question that kind of realm, whether that even exists. Because as soon as you ask the question, the collapse function happens, and that you are taking of the realities of. So Buddhists, as per their kind of understanding, they also agree that at certain level, in that particular moment, there was element of causation. Can you establish a law out of it? My question was maybe, if you really believe in quantum realm, the question, let's say, classical physics always has this problem with quantum, that do you have laws of physics like Newtonian physics, or you are just a system of probabilities and different weights. And as for Buddhism, the weights are those particular realities which exist at that time. There is no kind of, and I problematize Vedanta, that Vedanta would assume that there is this ever assuming singularity of Brahman, which will always exist, and we are all causation under it. But Buddhists would just say that's just a mythical, metaphysical understanding of yours. But what we are saying is we have this પાંચ, let's say they call it five kind of fundamental realities we have, and the interrelations between them. So that time I started reading a lot about Penrose, who won Nobel Prize, Roger Penrose on AI. He has written a lot on Buddhism. Jaquan Kim, he has written a lot on reductionism. That if you in analytical philosophy, it's very tough to accept anything which is non-physical. Even remember, I will also now, if you start questioning it, a lot of physicists would say biology, chemistry, all other sciences are technically derivative of physics.
That is true.
There,
Yeah.
there is no, we always call it bridge law. There is no chemical law
I
If
mean,
physics does not,
last year also the Nobel Prize I think was won by deep learning
yeah,
researchers, right? I think Jeffrey Hinton won the Nobel Prize in physics, and a lot of people were like, "How is
there
this
is no,
physics?"
yeah,
And
yeah.
then the counter argument was literally the entire world is physics. Everything just boils down to physics in the end.
So
But
that's
yeah.
a see that's a reductionist thesis. Now reductionist thesis explains a certain element of the world, that this is how world operates largely, but it
Mhm.
does not explain, why a certain chemical works in certain bodies. So at that level, there is some existence of mental causation. But strictly, can you say mental causation happens? For
Mhm.
that to exist, you have to have some element of quantum mechanics. And to be fair, we don't know those laws. Can you call those laws even? That's also another
Right.
question. So that was my thesis, and that's why the AI conversation comes about. That if
Right.
if self exists, then AI can have a consciousness, and also the question emerges that is consciousness a biological phenomenon which has been, which is like an emergent law. It is dependent upon a foundational law, but it has
Mhm.
some let's say autonomy in certain senses. In physics also, there is some element where we say, if you want to, let's say, fly an aeroplane, there is foundational physics. But how to fly an aeroplane, if you go this way to this way, there are laws to it. Some,
Right.
but you might problematize. Let's say a theoretical physicist might problematize the very idea of a law. They will say law is exceptionless, and Newtonian physics is.
So super
Fascinating.
interesting. Super
Yeah.
interesting. I think Akash has, immense amount of knowledge and philosophy. I'm just going to try and dumb this down for our audiences just to make sure we understand, right? So for a long period of time, I think thousands of years, if we trace this back to Aristotle, Plato, Thales, two schools of thought. One is that we live in a deterministic world. A deterministic world is one where the thesis, the hypothesis is that if you could quantify all the inputs or what the state of the world is at a point of time, let's say t, then it is possible to, deduce or find a set of laws which will tell you exactly what the universe will be like at t plus 1. So
Mhm.
it's deterministic basically.
Yeah,
Second
yeah,
school of thought, stochasticity, which
yeah,
is that at t and at t plus 1 there are multiple different equally probable events possible. So obviously, we'd like to think that the world is deterministic, because that is how science has been at least until the
yeah,
20th century, right? Because
yeah,
we like it when something can be explained in terms of mathematics and I can exactly tell you what's going to happen. So if I drop a ball today, I can exactly tell you what speed it's going to land at, right? So
yeah,
it's comforting.
yeah,
However, stochasticity comes in with quantum mechanics, and then
yeah,
people are like, I can't even tell the mass and the position and the velocity of
yeah,
something at one
yeah,
place with 100% certainty. And then with the stochasticity, I guess the question of free will also comes in, right? So if
yeah.
the world is indeed very stochastic, then maybe that is the source of free will. Am I summarizing this?
See, you're summarizing it well. So, point is, but the
Mhm.
free will question is little tough. We don't have to assume
Right.
a free will. See, the very idea that there is a free will, there is independent law which exists, which is operating this idea of free will. When you say free
Okay.
will, there is this foundational reality which you can determine. When I say I'm free, that means I can determine wi- on what I'm dependent upon, and I can put that dependence out of the equation. So, in simple terms, uh, if I have free will, I can change the nature I'm operating, the system I'm operating in. Most of
Right.
the time, humans can't. So let's say, yeah, and that's why most free will kind of theorists would end up, saying that we are autonomous in certain situational context. We can exercise autonomy, but largely, let's say the Earth is rotating, the sun is rising a certain level. Can you really control that element? But you can
Right.
understand some element of it and utilize it for certain situational purposes. So most free will theorists would say, in certain contexts, I can use those laws to mold them as per my situational need. But can you say a generalized free will exists? that would be good in, let's say, conversation, but we'll not be able to determine, let's say, in a scientific method way, can you replicate it, can you falsify it. So let's say when you say there is free will, can I falsify it? A good scientific method would be, which Karl Popper says, it's falsifiable, it's replicable, uh, it's demonstrable.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who you can demonstrate it, you can replay, you can falsify it, you can say there are limitations of failure. These are the areas where it can fail. In every science experiment will say in these certain conditions it will fail. So that's why these conversations become more philosophical, because these are good, let's say, questions to be asked, that if this person exists in this space, I think it helps to push the boundaries of science, like all comics does. Like, if you have these elements growing, and because you can imagine it, can you demonstrate some physical law towards it? And that pushes some boundary. Let's say 60s or 2001, you have Odyssey, you have this robots speaking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That pushes the see that creativity pushes the boundary of science. Some engineer might try to think underline what's happening is like a mechanical system. Let's say if you go to talk to my dadima or my grandmother, she might think that there is someone who's actually working on a mobile phone behind the screen. But we all know it's just a lot of algorithms coming together and doing things. So
You
a
know,
lot
in
of people
the
consider free will is like Excel working behind it. Or let's say a reduction would say it's a biochemical phenomena which is working behind you, which is giving you this false sense of free will.
in our intro, I introduced Akash as someone working in technology and policy. I think we should have put in philosophy there, right? Because right
Yes,
now, I think
absolutely.
we've covered like 30% of a philosophy 101 class. I think I remember a lot of things being discussed by, was it Professor Ritwik?
Yeah,
I don't
Professor
exactly
Ritwik,
Yeah,
yeah.
remember Ritwik. Yeah, it
Professor
was a
Ritwik, yeah,
fantastic professor.
yeah.
yeah,
Anyways, I'm going to.
A follow-up question on this. So you spoke about how your thesis led to you starting to learn and dive deep into the world of AI. Today, if we were to ask you, can these AI systems have a consciousness? What would you say?
yeah. See, then it goes back to the same question. So
Hmm,
let's say if they have consciousness, if I shut their energy systems off,
hmm,
can they operate?
hmm,
Same way, let's say when scholars used to ask that humans have consciousness, they say, let's say if I don't give you food, I don't give you water. Now,
hmm,
to make your question more, let's say if we accept these assumptions that they have always have
hmm,
energy systems, like we have food,
hmm,
can they have consciousness? The question is, how do you define consciousness? If you define consciousness of having basic conversation 50 years before, the Turing test was what? I'm not able to identify whether a chatbot who I'm talking to is a human or not. And that has been successfully done. Today,
Mhm.
most humans will not understand whether the response is from a chatbot or from a, let's say, a real human. So that if you define intelligence to have conversations,
hmm,
to, let's say, now to have speech or to have written material,
hmm,
that is done.
hmm,
But we still say it's not intelligent, because it's like you can say it's narrow intelligence. Can Now the conversation is, can you have general intelligence? Now point is, what is general intelligence? If, let's say, a self-driving car making having chats with your, let's say, doctor to make an appointment,
hmm,
will you call that system as, let's say, a general intelligence system?
hmm.
Or
Right.
do you think
Yeah.
all humans are just like that? Don't you are technically saying that humans technically are these people only who do this agentic work, do this mechanical work, and that's what we are?
Oh my God,
If
we've
you are,
come
if
full
you're
circle.
defining
We're doing
if you're defining
agentic work.
human, see, if you're defining AI as something
Mhm,
so narrow, let's say,
Right.
then yes, we have already they have consciousness. If you're defining consciousness in that way, uh, and
hmm,
that's why it becomes complicated. We say consciousness is more reflexivity. I can reflect on my own thought.
hmm,
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I think I remember one of the Jack Dorsey used to say this, that in 15 years, you will only identify someone as human is they can do vipassana, they can do some sort of meditation, because only that
hmm,
state you're totally your own.
I think
Otherwise,
ChatGPT would last a lot longer being quiet than I would, though.
it's not about quiet. Can it have its own internal thoughts?
Mm.
Right.
It's when we say it's analyzing, technically it's what it is doing. It is just going back and looking at the data. Now, either we are saying they are mimicking brain processes. So effectively, when I'm meditating, I'm also deeply analyzing my own algorithm. But why it
Mm.
is so efficient and so, let's say, it can store so much of data in such a small space?
Mm.
What is it
Right.
about carbon life? So that's the
Mm.
simple question. Can the carbon life be much more better than the silicon-based life?
Mm.
It's artificially constructed. So those questions were interested, but that doesn't answer the question. What is consciousness? And, uh, consciousness explained by this, I think one of the scholars, David. He used to say this. It's a very difficult. We call it difficult problem of consciousness. Easier problem is like you said. I can analyze something. I can go
Mm.
from one place to another. If you define consciousness like that, then are you pan conscious, which we believe in? Even the rock is conscious,
Mm.
or let's say birds are conscious. Pan psychic view that everything is conscious, which is then you believe in it. Vedanta.
Mm.
Vedanta says this, that every element has this consciousness spread. This is like a Vedantic theory that you have this Brahman which is ever spreaded everywhere, and every element is conscious. Which our parents used to say, our grandparents, that every element of the world, every small atom is conscious. Can you define consciousness like so loosely? Or if you say it's emergent to certain senses, that I can do
Mm.
complicated work, then you are creating a human exception.
Mm.
uh, uh, we have seen ants do much more complicated work. They do teamwork. They do some sort of dexterity
Mm.
in animal kingdom. Plants. I think I've read this interesting book on the world of forests. That how forests
Mm.
operate, how forest
Right.
emerges. They are also, let's say, complex adaptive ecosystem. Are they conscious? But they change as per weather. They change as per geography. They interact, reproduce in a different manner. So
Mm.
can you now these are the questions which come up when you talk about consciousness. So
Mm.
AI in that way is just helping us do one element of consciousness, which is this external
Mm.
facing work, which was really helpful for us. So I would say it's more like
Mm.
to still it's more mechanical replacement what we do.
Mm.
So I think this is like AI would really replace dirty jobs which we always thought draining jobs. It's like duplicative work, which
Mm-hmm.
so these are I 4 Ds: it's duplicative, dirty,
Mm.
that kind of. I'm forgetting the other 2 Ds, but it's this kind
Mm.
of AI is right now. This, can you
Mm.
still say humans are just that? They just do this.
Yeah.
Then what we have accomplished, and what we do is totally out of the window.
Yeah.
So I would say on the consciousness and AI part,
Mm.
that if you consider world as this mechanical workforce,
Mhm.
yes, we have already reached there because we knew. Remember, all this work was done by humans themselves. They knew how to architecture it.
Mm.
All external facing work, how to write an essay, how to send an email, how to drive a car. These are man-made things which we made. Can you? The interesting thing would be, which is difficult to do,
Mm.
is can you really have a system which is learning on its own
Mm.
about itself?
Mm.
I think Arvind Srinivas,
Right.
the Perplexity founder, says this. I think
Mm.
Nikhil Kamat's podcast. How do you uh, how
Mm.
do you have that kind of self-limiting function? We know our weaknesses. We know these are limitations.
Mm.
Someone is defining for the AI system. Can it learn its own? I'm more optimistic in that sense that we will use AI for more mechanical, external-facing things. Obviously, most jobs would go off because these are
Mm.
created by humans as per needs of economy. Those
Right.
Mm.
jobs will go off, and I agree with Bill Gates there that uh, certain element of we have to define and rechange our life, and purpose
Mm.
can't be linked with our jobs and what we do. It has to
Yeah.
be what we really feel and what we want. from our. That's why people who can do meditate, who can do much better spiritual, creative work, which is much
Mm-hmm.
more suitable because it's the complexity would be much better from an AI system. It's more intuitive thinking. I wrote in one of my articles, which I write monthly, that the commonsensical thinking. Let's say a Dhoni. Let's say a good scenario. Dhoni would have, let's say for international audiences, Indian cricketer who has led successful, let's say, World Cup campaigns for India, that all the data he can get from sports analysts, that you should not take the game to the end. But he is operating in, let's say, complex environment. He knows the incentives of other humans are. They might feel the pressure that if you stay calm and don't give into your nerves, technically, you give into nerves means you're also giving to your algorithms. Your body is reacting and saying, do this, do this. Their chemicals are reacting. You are feeling anxious, which is natural response in a pressure situation. You say, no, I will not. You're doing counterintuitive thinking. That helps you to win. So people who can demonstrate these leadership qualities of commonsensical thinking, not giving into your emotional impulses, which Plato used to say, that can you really be disciplined about your own emotions? Don't give it to them. Right now, hallucination is also AI accepting whatever algorithms it was trained on and not able to answer commonsensical answers. Let's
Right.
say on a driving part, if you're driving in a, let's say on a road, in India, you run on a lot of common sense. You can't train an AI system to
Yep.
not to stop when,
It's
let's say,
hard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you can't, because
Yes.
see,
It's hard.
it's very difficult to codify common sense, which is so
Mm.
humanly, let's say, accessible.
Mm.
You know what a
Yep.
commonsensical answer is in a cultural context.
Right.
So I think
Yep.
we will do a lot of complex tasks easily, a lot of these monetary work, uh, which is more mechanical, which is more dirty, which is more duplicate. But largely creative and, let's say, complex problem solving, we might
Mm-hmm.
use this sports analysts like cricketers and other people do, which I think Moneyball, you would really helpful if I know what is the player statistics. But
Right.
that time intuitive decision making, that's right now totally human, and I think that's emergent of evolutionary carbon life and silicon life because they never had that kind of, let's say, millions of years of encoded data available to them. They might not be able to do that kind of intuitive, let's say, fear and flight behavior which we have due to
Mm-hmm.
our, evolutionary carbon profile, which a silicon profile will never be able to encode as of now.
Right. Move the conversation slightly more on the career side. So, Akash, I mean, obviously, you're someone who's done a bachelor's in management and business, and then you went on to get a master's in liberal arts, right? And yet you ended up in one of the most high profile technology careers in the country. So just wanted to understand, like for the few people that are watching this podcast who have a non-technical background or looking to switch into careers in tech, but haven't written a line of code in their lives. So what advice do you have for them, if they want to break into tech, the kind of avenues available for them, etc., etc.
First of all, it's basic common sense in economy. Most AI is majorly replacing coders because
We'll
see,
see.
but
We'll see.
it
Jury's
it will
out.
not see. I see. No, no. I agree with your point. It will not replace programmers.
Hmm.
Programmability is about design. It's about creativity.
Right.
A good engineer is not about doing code well. It's also about deciphering a problem out and providing an
Hmm.
efficient solution. That is
Fair.
creativity. That is dynamic thinking and intuitive, which I was talking about Dhoni. It's
Right.
intuitive
Right.
common sense. And in pressure situations, I can do much better work than, let's say, a known other engineers. That distinguishes a good engineer from a bad engineer. Most people get
Right.
bored. It's not the coding you have to, let's say, give people. It's the skills of, let's say, deeply understanding yourself, your own incentive structure. So understand about psychology, read a lot about, how we think, how we understand, how, let's say, a child learns about themselves. That will help
Hmm.
you to understand people's incentive structures. So let's say a good, from economics point of view, uh, do so I will say psychology to understand, let's say, human brain, what drives us. Second would be economics, what drives the world.
Hmm.
uh, let's say, incentive structures of states, some element of, let's say, international relations, where you understand how states operate. When
Right.
you when we as collective bodies, they have their own, let's say, autonomous identities. They operate in a
Mhm.
very different history. We should know how we have reacted to situations when similar things happened. Now, if you're not written a code, let's say, you can still be a nuclear science specialist. Most nuclear scientists, non-technical, let's say nuclear policymakers, I should rephrase it, are not nuclear scientists themselves, but they
Right.
understands. Let's say John, the person who the realist IR theorist, John Nishamur, who talks
Mhm.
about, Ukraine and Russia. He's a IR scholar, political scientist. He's able to preempt certain actions of humans and states if certain things happens. Same
Right.
way, if you really want to understand a tech policy, you should know if a tech, let's say you are both engineers, if a technology or, let's say, platform reaches certain threshold, it will like to scale up. If you have
Right.
raised $100 billion, you need more customers. That's classic, econ thinking of competitive markets. You need to you want to need more users to come in. You want more data to come in. Right now, the new Ghibli art is about data gathering. Remember
Right.
Facebook did this with their 10-year thing, where they used to have this post of how would you look in 10-year challenge? How would you look
Right.
in
Right.
10 years later?
Yeah.
So what was that? That was classic data collection mechanics.
Yep.
Mhm.
When you are thinking I'm doing creative work. So all these systems are also deeply aligned to do data collection, to understand what people are thinking. That's why psychology and econ are like most important thing for me, for people. Don't read if you and then you understand, if you are working as a policy strategist or something, your own local laws. If you're working in China, your operations will be totally different. If you're working in Europe, you might not reach anywhere. But if you are working in US, your it's a very deeply private enterprise culture. It's
Right.
like it also comes from their history. Remember, they are in American philosophy. It was always like we made the world. We came on this barren land, and
Mhm.
we were settlers who did something. Same, they followed technology from that point of view. It's an empty space. We solved for something. We created something. In India, on a digital public infrastructure, I have 200 million households whose, let's say, whose per capita is less than $2,000.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My incentive structure as a policymaker in India is not to get winner takes all strategy. It has to be, can you uplift them in a, let's say, by having some private profit, private incentive, but still keeping those incentive structures aligned. So let's say in India, you will always have a gig economy welfare board, but you
Mhm.
still want to promote a lot of startups and private capital allocation, but you
Right.
still want work conditions to be better. So people who want to enter this space, first of all, be humble and respect certain technical talent. Go to your engineering friends, go to your technical friends, and I'm sure if they are not, let's say, if they're really humble about their field, they will know they don't know about other things. Just ask them, what is the architecture like? What are you doing? I remember one of the policy conferences, I was talking about how this AI system has come about, and my computer science friend who was from IIT Bombay, who just told me, "Yeah, this is the mechanics. Learn this. There is nothing something totally different happening." So they deciphered it for me, and as soon as that learning happened for me, I could help them to decipher IR history, let's say political economy of India, to some extent, sociology also, how these systems are gendered. Can you understand why this may not help for women, this may not help for certain groups?
Right.
But foundationally, be humble, go and learn what is an Excel system, what is ML, what is an AI. Don't consider AI as a thing which is out there. It's human made. People have learned. They have made transformers. It is additive research. They were reading the research. They were putting some experiments. Something happened. It was also private capital, South Bank coming in. Sometimes it's DARPA, government of US,
Right.
really helping the internet in India. It's technically government of India funding Aadhaar. So,
Right.
people who want to enter tech policy, understand tech from a layman's point of view. Go for your lectures, which you are teaching people. Second, learn psychology and econ. Really helpful. I will say everyone.
For policy,
read
right?
about. Yeah, for policy, thinking fast and
Yep.
slow. For policy business, see, if I operate in policy business and tech.
Right.
I also look at a lot of startup funding. I also look at how government should regulate. I also look at the core tech element of it. Sometimes I have to teach people, or who are business minded about tech. They don't want a technical conversation; they want a policy tech conversation. So it's all three things combined. So if you want to understand foundational learning of tech, foundational learning of econ, psychology, and then foundational learning of law, of constitution, how states are operated, all these three things come together, and then you can really give a good whole rounded answer. And sometimes you might like, let's say, certain field of tech. You might say, I'm more interested in blockchain, I'm more interested in cryptocurrency, I'm more interested in, let's say, cryptography, I'm more interested in national security. So you can
Hmm.
choose policy fields like that. Let's say my interest is in AI, so I'm more interested in ethics of AI. I'm more interested in how would you determine consent, how would you determine how states data flows. I'm more interested in data governance. So how would be the pricing of cross data flows. I'm interested in digital trade. That opens avenues for you. And if you're more interested in larger kind of general thing, then you go for foundational AI learning. I would say first of all go for Excel, then go for machine learning. If you're really good at statistics, because at
Right.
the end of it, it's about understanding numbers,
Yeah.
how and relations with numbers. So you have to be, if you really want for technical, I would say, are you good at mathematics and statistics? Is that thing, or if you're not good at that, are you good at understanding the principles? Then maybe your role is much more in a generalist kind of policy making, which is
Hmm.
non-specialist, which is more about how these systems would help, let's say, a marginalized community. How should a farmer access it? So you understand what is the mechanics of a farmer's life, build over it. Engineer also builds, let's say, a life cycle of a consumer. So you can build a life cycle of a farmer, their archetype, helper, engineer. You might not get paid that level. So his point is because you're solving a different problem. But if you're really interested in solving that, learn about more about that. So that's how I would say people who want to enter this
Hmm.
choose foundational econ, psychology, and some element of tech, and then you can specialize in specific problems which are suitable for you and
Right.
which helps you to move forward.
Big question for our title, but you're one of the only few people in the world who has discussed AI with Putin, right? So, want to know how that went about. What did you end up discussing? And, basically, what is the story behind it? Yeah.
So story is in this I think November last year. So Russia was also doing this AI alliance network, which is with BRICS countries because Russia is also part of BRICS. And as policymakers, so what ends up happening? Remember, all whatever the emergent phenomena, or let's say digital, or let's say econ or growth mechanics are in certain economies, political leaders are looking for jobs. They're looking either for saving jobs, either for mitigating a change, or to get competitive advantage. And AI fits in all three. It is going to transform jobs. It will create jobs. It will also create, let's say, competitive advantage to certain economies. So all countries would would go for understanding AI in all spaces. And these AI Alliance, let's say, organizers, they knew my boss really well. And he had gone to Russia for certain events, and I made those presentations for them. How should how would AI transform? What is weaponization of information? Whatever the topics the Russian people liked, and obviously as for situation. So they wanted me to talk about how AI would transform education and what is India doing about it. Because I'd worked in AI as a thing, and I'd worked in how I've written papers on performance dashboards and presented in Oxford Institute of International Development. Uh, my boss told me that why don't you go and talk to. I didn't know at that time that president would be with me on the same stage. I knew that there will be president, and like we have all been to those events. Chief guest is there, you are in the audience, and you are just having. I thought I would be part of the audience and might, as a representative, only representative from India, I might get a because due to the weight of my country. And remember, at that time, I was feeling not as Aakash Guglani. I was feeling a citizen of this great nation who's going there and representing. I was not thinking whether it's my personal glory. So they told me that you have to ask a question. When I reached there, it was totally changed. They told me, no, 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 you don't have to ask question because they're taking a lot of interviews for me. I thought, I don't know why they're taking 5, 6 interviews. every day. So later I got to know because it's the president's team, so they verify, they vet you whenever you go there. And a day before, I got to know that I don't have to do a presentation; I have to do a speech. First of all, I thought I have to do a presentation. You have to do a 5 minute speech, and the president would be listening to you in front of you. Okay, so he'll be same stage, and you have to do a verbal speech. And I got to know a day before. So I reached. And you have to do this COVID tests. They still do this COVID tests. So I have to be isolated. I have to do these. After year, I have to do this four. I think 3 or 4 tests whenever I was there. So it was more about it was a AI alliance conversation. I think it was there was Chinese representatives, there was a UAE representative. I was there, and there were Russian people, 2 Russian representatives, and there was the president. I talked about AI and education, and I talked about India's DPI, what we do in AI, open source kind of course curriculum. How do you help teachers? And obviously, it's a job question. They were like, AI is not going to replace teachers. It will make teachers much more better, much more efficient in doing. Remember, in India also, most of the teachers' actual job is administration. They end up doing more administrative work than actually how AI would solve for it. So, and I think he was very appreciative of that kind of intervention, that AI is going to help teachers. It's going to help educational. It will make, let's say, education more custom made. Let's say all of us have those concerns where we felt intimidated when we had to ask questions to our teachers in classroom of 100. And in engineering, you felt that if I ask a stupid question, I would be judged, and you never ask that question, and you never learn that concept. AI can customize as per your personal need. It will not judge you. It will give you answer in a simple manner. It will help any kind of education, e-education, that could happen. And it can help teachers become more efficient. They can do much high order thinking tasks. That was my intervention, and he considered that as a very important element. And how he thought that how India is a 1.5 billion kind of uh, largest size of economy with different languages is able to do it. And I told him that our open network kind of system was available in different languages for different lessons and freely available to everyone. So it was also access question. It was also a non-monopoly question. It was also diversity question, which world is speaking, which is not determined by few platforms. Remember, right now all educational content is in English and dominated by few big tech platforms. Most education content is Microsoft, Google, these people. We have our own Swayam kind of platform. It is totally our own study material, different languages. And we will use our own ML and AI engine to tailor made for our, let's say, people in Jabalpur and people in, let's say, Telangana, people in Tamil Nadu, in Northeast, in Jammu Kashmir, in Delhi. Not OpenAI will not determine my India's educational future. That was the larger thesis, and I think they want the same thing. They don't want only Western countries or certain platforms in the world dominate the education, which is so, let's say, local and so state centered and sovereign. So that was the conversation, and a good fun experience came back. Yeah.
Awesome. That's so fascinating. I had two questions, but I'm going to combine it into one. Tell us a little bit more about your projects that you have been exposed to in terms of like the digital public infrastructure initiatives in India and how learners can leverage, let's say, any frameworks that are out there if they're interested to be at the intersection of technology and impact. How can they participate in this whole DPI revolution that we're seeing today?
First of all, you can have a startup. So remember the cost of acquisition
Hmm.
of, let's say, a customer has gone down from $25 to $1. All
Hmm.
Zerodhas grow now. Phone Pay, Paytms would not exist if the cost of acquisition of a customer was not reduced by digital public infrastructure,
Hmm.
which was like you could do Aadhaar KYC. The foundational problems of our business is who you are, how do you
Hmm.
transact, and can I have a digital catalog of what you do? How
Hmm.
platforms earn that kind of money is because they know what are you doing by via cookies, via APIs.
Hmm.
What are you accessing? They have a digital catalog. They can organize it, and they
Hmm.
can they can. You are a, let's say, you are doing full stack kind of cycle of consumer in that same platform. You never
Hmm.
go out. So they know full cycle of what you do, how you transact, and who you are by having an
Hmm.
account. Let's say Amazon account or Google account. Google account is everywhere. They know what you're doing, from a screen touch on your phone to what movie you're watching, let's
mm,
say, and at what speed you're watching.
mm,
So I always distinguish between data and content.
mm.
People consider they know content, they know data. Data means they know much about you than other
Right.
people.
Yeah.
So that's what our strategy was. Can in that because they have that thing, they
Mm,
spend a lot of money for you to get into their systems. Platform economics. They want free cashbacks and everything for years on end. They spend
mm,
hundreds of millions of dollars. That's why
mm,
they will start charging 25-30% commissions when a paying customer comes in. And you're totally
mm,
lifetime dependent upon them.
mm,
You have to break that cycle. And
mm,
in India, Aadhaar broke that cycle by solving for who you are. So I can,
mm,
99% of Indians have a unique identity, which is what? Which
mm,
is like your fingerprints and your iris scan. Aadhaar is not a number. It's more like your biometrics. You solve for it.
mm,
Then you solve for kind of how you transact. You made zero
mm,
banking possible because cost of acquisition of bank went down. So I think World Bank did a study. The cost of reducing that customer acquisition to $1 opened these avenues for banking. Let's say 550 million banks. Let's say million accounts we have.
mm,
Let's say zero balance. Because you have now identity, you have a bank account with digital kind of information. Now you can transact easily, which was UPI.
mm,
All three things were done. So, and I think 2016, which Nandan says is one of the foundational years of India's, I would say, new
mm,
republic, is like you had Aadhaar reached 1 billion, Geo
mm,
came about, demonetization happened, UPI was launched.
mm,
So, and DigiLocker reached certain kind of critical element. All five things happened. 2016 is like our foundational
mm,
digital economy republic year. Because you could do that. Now what we now in the projects I'm discussing much are much more accessible to your listeners, which is open commerce. You could think about let's say a small vendor, because they can now transact online using let's say QR code. Had that not happened in 2018-19, had that not picked up, you could never think about open commerce, because open commerce always meant you need to have an account, you need to have an online presence, and you need to have
mm,
some kind of sort of cataloging. We solve for it by having that strategy document out, that you have this open cataloging, zero fee. So UPI was free, but
mm,
government was subsidizing. It's a classic public infrastructure, because it's the funnel is free, you can earn money by value added services.
Right.
So my work right now at ONDC, now I'm
mm,
not actively involved, but I was really involved in explaining ONDC as a concept to corporates, to
mm,
all these institutional investors, to marketing agencies, let's marketing kind of behemoths, that why you need
mm,
to invest in this. Because
mm,
what we're actually solving is not a competitor to private market, is to expand
mm,
India's total addressable market. Right now,
mm,
let's say unique users were 320 million say UPI. We want to take it to 600 million. If e-retailers were 180 million, can we take it to 500, 600 million? Can the e-commerce penetration increase from 6% to let's say 15, 20, 25%? It is not happening by PhonePe and Flipkarts and Amazons, because they are only solving for the top 1% of India, or top 10 lakhs, which is like less than 2-3% in India. Only when open, let's say, commerce, which UPI did for, let's say, payments, we have to do with commerce, we have to do with language, the Bhashani kind of LLMs, because you have to increase that access free of cost. India can't have that private strategy of monetizing
mm,
them. We have to have a strategy of including them, and then you earn money. You make sustainable returns by value-added services, either through
mm,
loans, either through, let's say, a small ticket. Let's say India's innovation, buy now, pay later. This is totally India innovation, which never happened, because you had no credit history. So,
mm,
making policies around it. Let's say we are now working on
mm,
unified lending interface. Can you have this open lending? Now I have GST data. Can I have
mm,
data from account aggregators? Now I have data from your UPI numbers. Can I have a collateral of it and give you a credit score, and really take this credit rating agencies to cleaners, because they charge
mm,
hefty sums to bankers, to financial institutions, and loan discharges like little bit.
mm,
So now we need more kind of financialization of India's savings, not in mutual funds, but also for loans, to make actual SME financing much more better. So that's one element which I'm working on. ONDC is one element. Other element is Bhashni. Can you have this open source LLMs? How do you price chips? I'm more interested in hardware part of it. Now you move further to the supply chain. Can I solve for India's supply chain security concerns? But should we go for ATMT kind of this assembly testing, packaging space? Do you go for foundational chips, fab factories? What is the how did Japan do it? So my research is how do you solve for that. And other element is which I really like is the IR of it, the competition. What would Trump's tariffs do to India's supply chain? How should India and Europe, collaborate? I was part of the Quad Fellowship for Indo-Europe Fellowship. So I'm answering these questions from. I understand India's domestic problems and what we have done in digital infrastructure, but we have to have these international cooperation partnerships. We really want to solve for the world, which we did for UPI. Now UPI is available in 15, 20 countries. That was
Right.
IR and tech and public policy and econ coming together.
Mm.
So that's what keeps me occupied right now. And also one element which we are doing is startup Makom. We are organizing it to bring startup
Oh, okay.
ecosystem.
Mm.
We are Arvind, also my boss, sits at the India's investment committee, which is this 10,000
Mm.
crore. We have let's say galvanized 90,000 crores to funnel into private capital in India. Now we are looking at next kind of allocation in deep tech research. Can you bring startups more in defense research, which US did in 1970s and 80s? A lot of big
Mm.
companies were startups. Can you build and really use this, which I think Indian Software Product Roundtable says? Can you make India a product nation? Not
Mm.
just a services business. Can you really make software, deep
Right.
tech, hardware products out of India? And our journey for next 20, 30 years is this, from a policy point of view. What should the right
Mm.
policies, economic incentives, and business environments be there to reach that kind of milestone? That when we can say, hopefully in 2050s and 60s, that we have reached 15, $20,000 per capita income and a kind of a developed state.
One last question before we conclude, and this is a kind of a tongue-in-cheek question. You told us that you had prepared for UPSC, right? Are you glad that that didn't work out? Because the job that you have right now sounds way more interesting, way more impactful than what I've heard. Uh,
I was telling I was telling this to Ashoka students. So right now I'm teaching at Ashoka also one of the courses with Arvind, and some students were asking or preparing for UPSC. That do you regret it? I was like, you know, uh, somehow destiny takes you to places you really wanted to.
Mm.
I really wanted to work in policy spaces. Now my counterparts are 30 years into their job. So all
Mm.
these policymakers
wow.
in Delhi, they are like at secretary, joint secretary positions. That means they've already spent 25 years. Obviously,
Mm.
they have such a strong ground experience. That is really helpful.
Mm.
But did ever wanted it? No, I only wanted this element. But
Mm.
the only funnel was through UPSC. But somehow, how policy ecosystem is developed in India, I can do this and still be helpful to them, to helpful to the country, and represent a country. So you remember, I was never interested in public enterprise in that way. I'm more interested, can I really feel, high when I get that tag of India and I'm talking about India as a country and what India is doing, than what my
Mm.
company is doing. Let's say
Mm.
what
Right.
my society is doing. That really, pushes me, helps me to move further, to go for the
Mm.
next day of the work, which is more like solving for India, building for Bharat.
Amazing.
So, any concluding remarks, Shweta, before
This has been
we?
insightful talk. Like I couldn't expect anything else from Akash. I think one of the key takeaways from the talk has been the importance of having an exposure to a diverse set of fields and in this evolving space where we are always thinking about the job market, where our job is gonna end up and are we safe in the job market? I think something that is important to remember is the importance of continuing to learn and explore our intellectual curiosities and get exposure to a diverse set of like subjects or fields and make the most of being in this particular era and completely dive in.
Thank you so much for joining us, Akash. We call him Gogs, by the way. But yeah, I mean, I think we're already at the hour mark. We'll definitely going to invite you to, a follow-up session because there are so many rabbit holes we can go into, right? So let's definitely do that. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Akash. This
and
was amazing.
really enjoyed this conversation. Back to our kind of Adda days in college.
Yes,
Hopefully we'll
yes.
do this more grander, more physical in a studio with both of you, maybe in different
Once we have
countries.
money. Once we have
Yeah, yeah,
money,
yeah.
yes.
Why not? I am manifesting that we do this in US
Yes,
sometimes. We'll fly straight into India, or you fly us. Maybe do it in
of course.
Singapore or maybe UAE or Saudi.
Yeah,
We don't know.
Why
very
We'll
not?
wear
We'll
good.
this
probably invite
very
Putin as well,
different.
you know. We'll probably
Maybe
invite
one
your
day,
buddy
who
Putin,
knows?
yeah.
Not my
Yeah.
buddy, but yeah, I don't want to call. Want to, but a really good fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, bye.